If someone tells you they need to get a life, tell them to join us here at Road Gang Radio with Lindsay Lawler and Jimmy Mack. Let's seize the day with Phone Master Dre.
I got to get on top of that. But hey, man, we're just happy to be here, and we miss Lindsay, so I had to throw that in. But Jimmy, let me tell you something, bro. I got a full tummy. I can't even talk right. I'm feeling good. I don't know who at Fastport, if I heard the young man right at the door, they dropped off some goodies for us there.
Some really delicious food, by the way. Brie and ham sandwich, some quiche, meat pie, all kinds of groovy
Coffees.
stuff. Thank you so much to our friends out there. Once again, if you ever want to send us anything, except don't send us the finger. But if you ever want to send us anything, that address is up there. The Degas House is 2306 Esplanade Avenue 70119. And I don't just mean like stuff for us, but stuff that you'd like us to hang on the wall, stuff you'd like us to celebrate. Don't ever feel that you can't. We'll put cards up on the wall. Any sort of patches you want to send, we will put it up and we will make it a part of this ever-growing landscape that is the Fastport Studios at the Edgar Degas House.
100%. And man, whoever it was, I think I kind of know, but we'll just leave it at that. Thank you so much. It was delicious. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so very much. OOIDA.com. On the Book of Face, you can find them at OOIDA. Same over on the Twitter, now known as X. The Tube of You, Truckers, OOIDA, and then OOIDA Truckers on the gram of Insta. And of course, it is the regular recurring guest, the man who shows up more often than anybody else. Collin Long, the Director of Government Affairs, is here for another edition, another rousing edition, infuriating, galvanizing, get your butt into motion edition of Washington Trucking Week. Good morning to you.
Long in the house?
I have to tell you, I'm not in the Emerald City. I'm actually in Kansas City at our board meeting.
Ooh.
So it's kind of Kansas City Trucking Week, I guess.
Well, I guess it's Kansas City Trucking Week. I guess it's birthplace of jazz. There's an argument, by the way, that people make that says that Kansas City is the birthplace of jazz. A few people down here might have a bit of an argument with it, but it's a great jazz city, and it's a great jazz place. It's a great place to be in general. Welcome. Glad you got a chance to get out of Washington, D.C. However, the good news is when you return, it'll be back in business.
Yeah, government's reopening. Not like anyone in trucking really felt it. I mean, FMCSA remained open throughout the 43 days that the government was shut down because, as I said before, it's funded by the Highway Trust Fund. So all that money you pay at the pump keeps the agency and the Department of Transportation largely moving forward during a shutdown. So thank you, truckers.
I sometimes wonder, by the way, if in fact that every nickel collected from the sale of airline tickets went towards the FAA, if people would have less of an inclination to ever end a shutdown, because one of the best ways to end a shutdown is the looming specter of nobody being able to get on a plane for Thanksgiving or Christmas. So, I think that they keep that in place, by the way. Now that they are back in business, let's talk about where the business is next, what is going on. Tell us a little bit about what you're kind of learning over there that you can. I realize that not everything that's happening there you can talk about, but talk about what the people you're talking to want to see happen when you get a chance to return to the Emerald City.
Well, I think actually right now folks are focusing on what's going on in the courts and their impact on what happens in Washington. If you saw the non-domiciled CDL interim final rule that the Trump administration issued recently has basically been put on ice. It's not dead, but there's been a stay issued, which would basically pause implementation of the final rule. So we're watching that closely, but there is a play here as far as Capitol Hill is concerned, because, we've always said this bill from Chairman Rouser, the Non-CDL Integrity Act, needs to be passed because it would make the Trump interim final rule permanent. It would make it law. And now with the courts getting involved and putting a stay in place and maybe ruling against the agency, though I don't think that will ultimately happen, I think it puts more onus on members of Congress, elected officials, to get this done. So we will be redoubling our efforts on Capitol Hill to generate support for Chairman Rouser's bill. And frankly, I mean, there's dozens of sponsors on it already, so it shouldn't be a tall order for us to get quite a few more now that the courts have weighed in and are potentially throwing a kink in the plans.
Really quickly, by the way, just for the people who don't know, an emergency interim final rule to clean up the non-domiciled CDL system was paused by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. They did that on Monday. What they did, though, was, I want to make this really clear to people, this is what they said in the ruling so that people don't have an absolute conniption. The purpose of this administrative stay is to give the court sufficient opportunity to consider the emergency motions for stay pending review and should not be construed in any way as ruling on the merits of those motions. And when the court says that, what they really are saying, we are not giving our opinion either way. We are actually reading this to make sure that there's no places that need to be cleaned up and tightened up, which is why, tell me if I'm wrong, it's important that the legislature, this is not a presidential power, that the legislature actually do this, because in doing it, they will actually make it harder to challenge. Executive orders or anything coming from the executive branch can be challenged 6 ways to Sunday. By passing this, they indemnify it against that. And there might be even something, depending on how the court rules, that allows that law to be written properly by giving them there's some errors in here, but we're going to go along with it. But it's a good kind of way to remind people that this process is a conversation happening between all 3 branches of government.
I think you nailed it. Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing that's important to remember with this stay that was issued by the court is it kind of hinges on the emergency nature in which the interim final rule was issued. I think the plaintiffs in the case are basically questioning whether or not there was truly an emergency. I mean, from our perspective, when the Department of Transportation does an audit and finds that most states have some sort of record of noncompliance with CDL issuance when it comes to non-domiciled CDLs, we view that as a pretty serious matter, and that's probably an emergency. And I think you've seen a lot of attention recently, including today, on the state of California. I mean, I think they're looking at 17,000 non-domiciled CDLs that had been issued outside compliance. To us, that sounds like a pretty serious matter. I'm not going to weigh in on whether or not it's an emergency, but like I said, it just redoubles our efforts to make sure Congress passes the bill so that this thing can be permanent and the courts can't really delay its implementation or potentially reverse it.
Well, and I'm going to be a man of the Republic with a lowercase r and the capital R here, and kind of remind people, if you're going to challenge this thing, that's exactly where you should have challenged it, because one of the problems that courts are very wary of is when the state of emergency becomes the norm and not the exception. That is a form of government that nobody wants to be a part of. And so it might be a good reminder, we'll see, to the executive branch to stop declaring everything an emergency, because when one comes along, and by the way, you make a really good case. You could make a case that this is an emergency, but if everything is an emergency, the court goes, you know what, you've called other things an emergency too, so which one is the real emergency here? That's where you get into trouble. It's the best challenge, but it's also going to allow Congress time to get something written and get something done. And, you don't pass the Emergency Act. You know what I'm saying? You're passing laws.
You're totally right.
And that's what it kind of comes down to. So like I said, you hit the nail on the head, too. It really is about looking at that. Okay. Can you do me a solid here? And I hate to do this to you again, but we keep on going back to this because there's a lot of people who just keep on misunderstanding this. Would you explain a non-domiciled CDL holder, what that actually means? Because I think a lot of people put it under a blanket. And there are examples of non-domiciled CDL holders who may still end up driving at the end of the day.
Yeah, and but I think I can't even remember who it was who said this first, but they said it really well. Like, the intentions of the non-domiciled CDL program were legit. I mean,
it was me.
An American citizen should be, it probably was you actually, should be capable of getting their CDL in a state where they are not domiciled. I don't think anyone really had issues with that. We might have grumbled about it at the time at OOIDA because we were concerned about the impact from American drivers hopping from state to state to get their CDLs. But Correct. I think what we've discovered over the years is that folks who want the cheapest labor possible have found a way to use the non-domiciled CDL program to bring in drivers from outside the country, drivers who aren't even domiciled in the U.S. And that's where the problem is, because a lot of those folks aren't going through the same vetting as domestic drivers. and their training might be up to par, but I think we've also got concerns about their grasp on the English language in mind. And there's been a lot of focus on English language proficiency. I'm not saying everyone who has a non-domiciled CDL struggles to speak English or read signs in a proficient manner, but there's definitely some sort of correlation. So we've been saying since earlier this year, when our members really started raising the red flag about this, someone needs to take a look at the non-domiciled CDL program to determine who are the drivers who are getting these licenses, who are the motor carriers who are employing these drivers, and what is their safety record. And I think that was kind of the spark that led USDOT to begin their nationwide audit of the states. And, they have been very clear over at FMCSA that they were shocked what they found from the audit. There's many states who are non-compliant, frankly, red states, blue states. It doesn't matter what your political inclination is as far as the state is concerned. Most of them were issuing non-domiciled CDLs in a non-compliant manner. So that's a problem. That needs to be addressed immediately. And that's what we believe the interim final rule did. And that's why we support the Rausser bill, because it'll make sure that a future administration can't come back in and relax the rules that the Trump administration has put in place to allow more cheaper labor to get into the industry through the non-domiciled CDL program for folks who aren't even domiciled in the U.S.
Yeah, and by the way, like I said, I mean, I went back and I read the language of it, and it makes me crazy because there really is a noble purpose in there. It's to kind of go back to the idea of free soil,
Sure.
the idea that you can pick up, your work trial and cross a border and be able to work over there and get your stuff done. How it's written, the Mack truck loophole that's in it is that it allows people to go CDL shopping, is what it does.
Mm-hmm.
And in the sense that it's like, and this is why California, and by the way, guys, I'm going to keep on saying this, the administration, and I'm going to talk a little politics here, I'm not going to put Collin in the middle of it, the administration is focusing its attention on California for political reasons, but we got friends in Texas, and we love them, who will be the first to tell you, man, what's going on there has equal problems. I mean, there are people who are handing this stuff out like candy, and, it's to remember to keep our eyes on the prize, which is equal enforcement everywhere all the time. And that's really kind of what you guys are kind of pushing towards. Let me ask you a question, because, you are not a prognosticator, but you're pretty good at knowing what things' chances are. This actually could pick up some steam and might even pick up some bipartisan support, correct?
Potentially. Nowadays, it's difficult to predict what could generate bipartisan support because the parties in Washington are at kind of polar opposites right now. But English language proficiency as an issue, I think Democrats could understand that is a serious problem. I mean, they all read road signs when they're driving. They all communicate with law enforcement officials on the roadside as well. And I think understanding that a lack of English contributes to negative safety impacts, I think that was pretty prevalent among Democrats. The non-domiciled CDL program, I think we'll have to wait and see. Right now, there isn't any Democratic support for the Rausser bill in the House. I think there's over 30 Republicans on board. But adding your name as a co-sponsor and ultimately supporting the provision when it comes up for a vote are two different things. And I think when members of Congress are given the opportunity to potentially vote on that, whether it be a standalone bill or in a larger piece, I don't think there's going to be a lot of opposition to cracking down on the non-domiciled CDL program when FMCSA has been so clear that all these states, again, you hit the nail on the head, red or blue, have been non-compliant. That should be a concern for any elected official in Washington, and frankly in state capitals as well, if we're being honest. But that should sound alarms for anyone in Washington who's focused on improving highway safety, because having undervetted and underqualified drivers getting their CDLs and getting behind the wheel of an 80,000-pound truck with the type of entry-level driver training we have in place right now should concern everyone. And that's why, we look at this issue as one piece of a much larger puzzle. We want to address the non-domiciled CDL program. We want to address English language proficiency. However, we also want to make sure that training standards are up to par, and we're not just churning through drivers because large carriers out there want cheap cheap labor. They want cheap drivers. We want to make sure that these drivers are well trained and prepared for a long and safe career in trucking, because not only does it improve highway safety, it enhances the professionalism of our industry. And I think a lot of drivers have really focused on that lately. We need to bring this back to the type of profession it was decades ago when people respected drivers, because they were often the safest drivers on the road. And I still think they are, frankly, but there's more that can be done. I don't think anyone will look at the entry-level driver training standards and say that is sufficient. So we are continuing to push on multiple fronts to improve safety through training and through vetting of candidate drivers.
Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, it is a situation, and I don't know how much you heard of Jim Park in the previous episode. He actually expressed deep concern that Ontario was being used as an entrance point, because if you can get behind the wheel of a truck in Ontario, you can use that as a way of kind of parlaying your way towards Canadian citizenship. It has become their kind of loophole over there, that the quickest and fastest route to becoming a Canadian citizen, whether you stay behind the wheel or not, is behind the wheel of a truck. And so much of this, we've been talking about this, and I'm gonna beat this drum with you. I really think that the biggest problem with the training in this country in regards to what passes as good training in some areas, and by the way, I'm not including my friends at the CVTA or the NAPF TDS who are right there with you guys on this. The biggest issue is, I think if you properly train people and give them the information that they need, what ends up happening is that they understand all the work they have to do, and they start asking for the kind of money they deserve. And that is what a cheap CDL mill does. It allows people to, at the source of the learning, depress the value of the market. Sorry, that's my TED Talk for you today. That's it.
There's no need to apologize. That is absolutely right. And that's a message we've been trying to convey in Washington, D.C. And frankly, we've been capitalizing on the focus that lawmakers in Washington have had on ELP and non-dom to say, that's only a part of the solution. You guys have to focus on training. Training is key, and not just what happens to the driver, but what happens to the training schools who are failing us. What happens to the training schools who aren't producing safe drivers? And we can tell that now because of the entry-level driver training rule. We should be able to kind of reverse engineer safety records to figure out if there are training schools out there who are doing an insufficient job. And I think, thankfully, we have an FMCSA leadership in place who wants to go down those rabbit holes. And I think we're going to see folks removed from the training provider registry relatively soon. They are committed to cleaning that up. We stand with them on that. So there's a much broader spectrum of issues that go into this. I mean, everyone in trucking knows that. Nothing is in a vacuum as far as policy is concerned in trucking. Everything has an effect on everything else. But we want to capitalize on the focus on safety right now on Capitol Hill and say, here are other steps that must be taken, including don't pass the Drive Safe Act, which, if folks aren't familiar with that, it basically opens the door for 18, 19, 20-year-olds to enter the long-haul industry with minimal training. We think that's the wrong approach to things. We've come up with an alternative that we think is better for safety and better prepares those young drivers for eventual careers in the long-haul industry. But it's again this quest from large carriers to have this vast and ready supply of the cheapest labor possible, and I think a lot of folks are under the impression that's limited to folks who maybe don't have a full grasp of the English language or aren't domiciled in the U.S., but they also want teenagers behind the wheel, and that is alarming because we know they won't be treated well, we know they won't be compensated well, and that affects everyone in the industry who is either operating behind the wheel or wants to begin a career behind the wheel.
You ready for TED Talk number 2?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, okay. So often the people who are trying to clean up this system, many of them, some of them, and by the way, there are some fellow travelers here that I don't want any part of this conversation, are often accused of xenophobia, that this is an attack on people who come from other places, and that is furthest from the truth, because just in the same way that somebody who comes to the border, plays by the rules, follows the system, waits patiently in line, does all their due diligence, follows the instructions of the game as the way it's set up, and then enters the country. We owe it to them as much as we owe it to any American citizen, because if we're telling people that the rule of law that they're following can actually be circumvented, what are we telling those people? And if, in fact, we have a rigorous form of training, and the men and the women who come here from other countries understand that there's an English proficiency with it, it better actually assimilates them into the fabric of the nation, and it also means that anybody who is being judged by the color of their skin, we know it's happening, as opposed to right now people screaming and complaining, saying this is what's happening. It removes any of that confusion, by the way. It is not anti-immigrant. It is not anti-anybody. It is an attempt to set standards. It's pro-trucking. It's pro-driving. That's it. TED Talk.
I mean, totally agree. And I might get myself into a little bit of trouble here, but
let's go. Let's go there. Come on.
If you have empathy and compassion for the folks who are currently operating on non-domiciled CDLs who aren't domiciled in the U.S., keep in mind these aren't the best jobs in trucking, and they're not being treated by the motor carriers that folks want to drive for often. These are tough jobs. They're not treated excellently. They're not paid well. It's not a great life to have to grind with a non-domiciled CDL. I mean, all truckers are out there grinding, but a lot of them have had enough success and enough training to have some pretty good jobs. These folks aren't in that category, and I think it all gets back to your point, though. I mean, if they are being granted CDLs in an unlawful or non-compliant way, we need to clean that up. The industry shouldn't have to suffer through non-compliance of frankly any sort. I mean, truckers aren't allowed to waive compliance with anything without getting in trouble. So to promote safety and to promote professionalism in the industry, I think rules need to be followed. And we found that that's simply not happening with the non-domiciled CDL program.
Let's go one step further. Let's say that even if it's being done legally, it doesn't mean it's ethical. Like I said, just because you're actually able to put the long R of a contribution, a campaign contribution, or somehow believe that that a free market is really only free for the people who actually hold the cards, that's not acceptable either. I mean, let's have a real honest conversation. There are people who have CDLs that are completely legal, meaning if they got pulled over, and some of them speak incredibly fluent English, who should not be behind the wheel of a truck. And that's unethical. It's not illegal, but it's really unethical, and it's really a word I get one curse word of the day. It's shitty. It's downright not cool. The fact that it's like that there are places that can simply hand them out like they are toilet paper, and that's about the value that is placed on them by the people who are handing them out, and then they are passing them off. If it isn't even an in-house thing, they are then passing them off to companies who think that's the standard of what the American driver should be. They're trying to set a standard that is going to depress wages for everybody. And they haven't really gotten that far with it yet in regards to really doing damage. But what they want to do is they are literally like abusive spouses. They are testing the limits of what they can do. Okay, TED Talk number 3 is
absolutely.
Over. You know.
That was a good one. I mean, and that's what we're trying to convey to folks in Washington, D.C. And I think it's working. I think people are starting to understand and appreciate the fact that truckers want to be treated like the professionals they are. But until the industry is cleaned up from a number of angles, I mean, let's talk about lease-to-own schemes. Those are still lingering out there, too. There's no way those are enhancing professionalism and boosting compensation to a point where it should be these days. There's a number of symptoms out there that need to be rectified. And thankfully, I think we have a lot of folks in Washington, D.C. who are now paying more attention and discovering there are opportunities for them to get behind some of these policy changes that we've been promoting. And hopefully our timing is good, because there is a highway bill coming next year, and that's where a lot of these issues will be addressed.
Well, and the other problem is, too, number 4, is the fact that, automated trucking is coming. I actually am one of those people who believes that it's going to actually free up drivers to do more stuff in regards to kind of be in the cab and be present and focus on customer service and the quality of what is being delivered, and making sure that the equipment is working at its full function. Every minute we waste playing these games means it's more and more time that our friends who need to get the education and the upgrades to understand what their job will look like in 20 or 30 years, it is one day further that we don't get them down the road a little bit further. The deterioration of training is setting us up for an actual disaster when there's nobody who wants to do the jobs, and these jerks who think they're going to automate the entire country are going to find out, what am I going to do? All my equipment is breaking down and everything in the back of the truck is going bad because there isn't a qualified human being sitting there. That's it. That's my futurist complaint. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise that the same folks who are pushing for policies like non-dom CDLs and 18, 19, 20-year-olds are the same ones who are promoting driverless trucks on Capitol Hill. I mean, it's not rocket science to figure out what they're up to.
Well, it's create your own problem. It's like, well, look at all these non-domiciled CDL drivers and all these kids who don't know what they're doing because they weren't properly trained. We got to go to automatic vehicles now. I mean, it's like literally you create your own market, and then we revisit it and see if we have anybody willing to get inside one of those cabs anymore because they've just told the people that this is a terrible place to work and nobody should work here. There you go. Sorry, I'm pissed off.
We've been kind of using the conversation and the controversy around the driver shortage myth as a way to demonstrate to folks on Capitol Hill that there's many, many bad policies built on that BS. And a lot of them have the sole goal of bringing the cheapest labor possible into the industry as drivers. And as a result, we're seeing I'm giggling because I'm frustrated, but you're seeing road safety decrease as a result. It's not surprising that in an industry where the largest carriers want the cheapest labor, it's resulting in deadly and high-profile crashes. I mean, it's not difficult to figure this out. And unfortunately, I think it's taken years and years and years of this driver shortage myth, of us fighting this driver shortage myth, before folks on Capitol Hill are starting to put these pieces together and realize, oh yeah, the folks who are out there still claiming there's a driver shortage, despite the fact Secretary Duffy even says there isn't, are the ones who are in this perpetual desire for cheap labor. And as a result, we're seeing deadly crashes happening on the road with folks who have gotten their CDLs through a lot of these cheap labor policies.
There are people, by the way, Collin, who literally, they say it. They just automatically say driver shortage and catch themselves because you know what my biggest problem with the driver shortage myth is that it insists upon itself. It is the zombie of all zombies. It literally, you think you've buried it, put it back in the earth, poured radioactive waste on top of it, and yet it somehow still comes up out of the ground. Collin, that's all the time we got. You really got me fired up today, man. Tell everybody over there in Kansas City I'm thinking about them, okay?
Will do. I'll give them all high fives from you.
All right, my friend.